Thanks for coming back to Midnight Reflections. Passengers is a 2016 sci-fi, romance, and drama movie that I'm going to show you today. There are spoilers ahead. Be careful, and watch out. You can see the interstellar spaceship Avalon moving through space. It's on its way to Homestead 2, a world that has already been settled. The ship is on autopilot, so all of its rooms are empty. Both the 258 team members and the 5,000 passengers are sleeping. The ship suddenly goes through a belt of asteroids, which makes its protection less strong. The power is sent to the main shield, but the ship is heading straight for a huge rock. All of a sudden, the rock hits the ship, messing up many things. The ship starts to fix itself, but one of the sleep pods wakes up. Jim Preston, a mechanical expert, is the passenger who woke up. His pod opens, and a computerized system helps him wake up. It tells him that he's been in suspended animation for 120 years and that the ship is only 4 months away from Homestead 2. People have told him that he can enjoy the ship's high-class features during that time. Jim is given information about his ID band, his cabin, and the main things he needs to do before he gets into the world. He gets ready, leaves his cabin, and walks into an automated class for a whole learning group. He is both excited and scared to meet the other people on the ship. The hologram talks about how things are on Earth and says it is overcrowded, expensive, and overrated. Jim looks a little worried. But Jim won't stop asking why he's the only one there, even though it says to wait until the lesson is over. He knows that the hologram can't answer, so he looks for other people. He makes it to the ship's main hall. There is also no one there, but an automatic information desk is there to help. When Jim asks to talk to a real person, he is sent to talk to a steward. When he gets there and finds no one there, he asks to talk to the captain. In spite of not being able to go inside, he can see that no one on the main crew is awake when he gets to the bridge. When Jim finally gets to the telescope, he learns that the ship is 90 years away from Homestead 2. Seeing that he woke up too soon, he quickly goes back to the hallway and sends a message to Earth, asking what he should do since he doesn't know how to go back to sleep. The signal system tells him that the return call from his expensive call to Earth would take 55 years. Jim is very sad. He looks around and finds the bar on the ship, where he sees someone else. Something about him seems off as he talks to the bartender. Jim finds out that he's a robot when he goes to get him a drink. It's named Arthur. Jim wants to know more from him, but he can't even tell the robot how he got there early. The next morning, Jim wakes up in his cabin and goes to the cantina. Right away, he learns that most of the food on the menu is only for gold-class travelers. He gets a simple cup of coffee and tries to figure out how to fix his place to sleep. As soon as he has all the tools, he sets them up and then lies down inside the pod. But nothing takes place. The next thing he does is decide to use the tools he found to get into the crew's sleeping areas. Also, that doesn't work. Things go wrong in small ways all over the ship. Jim keeps going back to the bar to talk to Arthur and drink. The robot tells him some things that make him want to break into one of the rooms made of gold and have fun on the ship. Jim checks out all of the places to eat, play games, and watch movies. However, being there by yourself gets even worse over time. He gets drunk one day and starts to wander around the hibernation pods. By accident, he comes across a hatch with spacesuits made for spacewalks. I put on a suit and went to the airlock. I push a handle and then press the button to open the airlock door. When he gets off the ship, the view is stunning. He is the only awake person in that room at that very moment. When Jim lets go of the magnets on his boots, he floats in space, sad. He goes back inside, takes off the suit, and then goes back to the exit without it. Before pulling the button to end everything, he changes his mind. He runs back inside and trips over a bottle. When Jim gets up, he is pulled right away by Aurora, a woman in one of the pods. He looks for her files in the directory and falls in love with her as he listens to her passenger interview. Afterward, He was seen still listening to her talk while sitting next to her pod. After going back to the bar, he reads some of her work and talks to Arthur about it. The irony of his position consumes him. He wakes up early to go to another planet for a better life but never gets there. He finds the perfect woman, but she's out of reach. As Jim thinks about her more, he gets the idea to wake her up too. The robot helps him think about it, but he still doesn't get it. To get what he wants, he would have to wake her up and leave her on the ship to die. It takes Jim a while to decide not to do it, but he can't help himself, until he changes his mind one day. Eventually, he gets to her pod and turns it on. He hides and goes back to his room just as she wakes up, doing the same thing he did. After a while, he goes to the main hall to look for her. She looks just as lost as he did a year ago. Jim takes her to the tower and tells her that they are the only ones awake. Then he tells her that he can't reach the ship's crew or the people in charge. She gets scared and wants to go back to her pod. When they get there, Jim tells her that there is no special tech on the ship that can help them go back into hibernation. This means that they are stuck. Now that they are back at the hotel, he tells her to rest because he just woke up from his sleep. She feels bad that he has to be on the ship by himself for more than a year. Jim feels bad about what he did and goes back to the bar. He tells Arthur not to tell Aurora that he woke her up. Aurora gets up the next day. She goes back to the main area and asks the automatic information desk about the pods for hibernation. Jim comes over and joins her. The two of them then go to breakfast. As they leave, something goes wrong at the information desk. Aurora finds out that Jim has been eating the same breakfast for more than a year in the cantina and gets him one of the gold-class meals. They talk about how the pods might be fixed, but Aurora isn't ready to give up like Jim is. She starts by looking in the hospital, then moves on to study papers, and finally tries to break into the crew's sleeping quarters. Jim sees more problems with the ship as a whole. Later, Aurora talks about how sad she is about her life on the Avalon. Writing, running around the ship, and swimming in the pool make her more aware of what's going on. She goes to the cantina to talk to Jim because she thinks his story could be interesting. She asks him why he moved to the colony. Jim starts his answer with business slogans and then goes on to say that he hopes to be someone and have a life in the new world. After some time, they get to the telescope, where Aurora finally tells them why she's there. She has a round-trip ticket, which is different from the other people on the ship. She planned to move to Homestead 2 and live there for a year. Then she would write the best story ever and be the first journalist to do that when she got back to Earth. As Aurora gradually loses hope in solving their current situation, Jim finds a means to make her feel better. He brings her to the movies, the basketball court, and dancing. Finally, he brings her to meet Arthur at the bar. She unwinds for a while before realizing what has happened to them. Feeling terrible about what he's done to her, Jim is left alone with the robot. When Aurora enters the observatory, the next time she sees him fiddling with something, she finds a miniature version of the Chrysler building he constructed for her. They go on a date at the bar after a while. While eating, they converse about their life stories. Her father passed away when she was a teenager, she informs him. Jim brings Aurora to the airlock after supper so they can put on their spacesuits. Together, they take a spacewalk. Jim may now finally tell someone about that amazing encounter. Jim turns off the magnets in their boots, causing them to levitate in space together. After returning inside, they share a kiss, go to his cabin, and spend the night together. They soon begin living together as a couple. Moving into his stateroom, Aurora begins writing about her time on the ship. They share meals, sleep, and jog together. Jim discovers the hydroponics bay as he continues to investigate the ship. He brings flowers to Aurora. They visit the observatory to view a red giant that the ship passes by one day. Later that evening, they celebrate Aurora's birthday at the bar and then at one of the ship's various restaurants. While Aurora remains in the bar speaking with Arthur, Jim uses the restroom to get ready for the ring he designed for her. The android, not realizing he was still keeping it a secret, informs Aurora that Jim purposefully woke her up. She confronts Jim in complete shock as he appears out of nowhere. She flees, terrified and enraged. When Jim returns to his cabin, everything she owned has vanished. The following day, he bumps into her in the cantina, but as soon as he says anything, she takes off. Aurora is in a desperate situation. She visits Jim's cabin one night and starts hitting and kicking him because she wants to murder him. Jim tries to explain his conduct and apologize to her over the phone while she continues to avoid him. Aurora doesn't seem to care that he told her he fell in love. She is unable to forgive him for killing her. While Jim is in his cabin one night, there is still another issue. The main command shuts down when the spacecraft encounters a critical error. When he enters the elevator later, it breaks down. Jim has planted a tree in the main concourse, which Aurora notices as she enters. She then visits the cantina, where there is a faulty food dispensary. Abruptly, they both hear the deck chief's voice on the comms, inquiring as to who planted the tree. Jim's tree is in front of Gus Mancuso when they both dash into the concourse. They greet the chief and inform him of the circumstances. He doesn't see how 3 pods could go bad. When Mancuso brings them to the bridge, he finds that there is a problem with the spacecraft, but that manual verification of the data on the systems is required. A robot nearly falls on their heads as they exit the bridge, and they inform Mancuso that chip problems have been occurring increasingly regularly. As he demonstrates to them how to get the data, he says that shouldn't occur. Jim joins Mancuso at the pods, where he checks on them. He knows what transpired with Aurora's pod. The deck chief thinks Jim did a terrible thing. Later, Aurora joins him at the bridge, where he is reviewing the gathered data. They discuss what transpired with her pod, but he informs her that there is nothing he can do. Jim enters carrying the 16th damaged robot. Mancuso goes to bed after getting the hibernation illness, but on his way out, he coughs up blood. When Aurora can't sleep that night, she takes a swim. The ship experiences a sudden loss of gravity, causing the pool's water to travel with her as she begins to drown. She narrowly survives when the gravity drive resets. While searching for Mancuso, they cross paths with one another. They are back on the bridge and are slowly figuring out what has been going on with the ship. 2 years ago, something Mancuso devised knocked out a significant system. Because the whole ship is trying to make up for it, they need to figure out what went wrong and fix it. The whole ship will be stuck if they don't fix it. When they try to figure out what's wrong, Mancuso passes out, so Jim and Aurora take him to the hospital. He is dying, and there are no treatments that can stop it or make his time left with us longer. After some time, they all meet up in the observatory. Mancuso gives Jim his ID band, tells them to fix the ship, and then dies. All of a sudden, the lights turn a scary red, and the ship starts to shake. Jim tells Aurora that he needs her help, and the two of them run to engineering, but the gravity drive breaks down again. Right away, another one strikes Arthur as well. Jim turns him off. There they are, in engineering. Now they have to find the trouble. It's in the power plant, and Aurora gets sucked in when they open the hatch. The rock has made a hole in the hull there. Jim also gets sucked in, but he holds on to the hatch because it won't let go. At some point, he too gets sucked in, but they quickly close the hole. As soon as Jim fixes that problem, he sees that the hull has more than one hole in it. As they follow the meteor's path, they find that it has hit the computer that controls the reactor. Jim is sure he can find new parts for it. Even though they change the part that they find, the process of releasing the reactor still doesn't work. They do it by hand, but it still doesn't work. Now Jim knows he has to open the vent door from outside the ship in order to cool down the reactor. He gives Aurora Mancuso's ring as he's getting ready to leave. He does this because he might not come back. She helps him put on the suit and tells him to come back as he goes through the airlock. She can't live on the ship without him. Aurora goes back to the reactor, where the temperature has reached a very dangerous level. As Jim moves toward the vent from the outside and sees the door, a bolt from the reactor shoots into her arm. As he tries to get around the vent door to open it, the temperature in the reactor room rises. As soon as he sees it, he has to hold the door open by hand so the reactor can vent. He tells Aurora this. He is set on going with the plan, even though she doesn't like it. He tells her to vent the reactor. He tells her that they need to save the other people, and she opens the reactor. They fight because she doesn't want him to die. Yes, the process works, but the fumes from the reactor push Jim away and let go of his chain. It's also putting less pressure on his suit. When he tells Aurora what happened, she quickly runs to another suit and brings him in. He tells her that he's sorry again. Putting on a suit, she flies to get him, but her line is too short. Even though she is being pulled back, she suddenly grabs his rope and pulls him in. When Aurora takes Jim to the hospital, she finds that he is already dead. She goes against hospital rules and Mancuso's him back to life by using Mancuso's bracelet. The medical pod instantly brings Jim back to life. Aurora lets him go. After some time, Aurora fixes Arthur, and they properly bury Mancuso in space. She goes to the hospital with Jim, who tells her that he has found a way to turn the medical pod into a sleep pod. He tells her to get in the pod and stay there for the rest of the trip. It turns out that she says no and chooses to stay awake on the ship with him. Jim asks her to marry him, and they end up living together on the ship. After 88 years, the Avalon arrives at Homestead 2. When the crew wakes up, the ship is in a state they didn't expect. Aurora sends them a message, telling them again about her and Jim's time on the ship while everyone else was sleeping.